Yeah, perfect. Okay, how am I changing slides? Yeah. Okay, so I think the most exciting thing about BIFoR is the collection of multidisciplinary work that it brings together, but now we're on to something completely different. My name is Emma Ferranti and I work in the School of Engineering. I've also run a network for the last 4 or 5 years now called the Trees and Design Action Group. I run it with a colleague in London. And TDAG is a network and charity that brings together individuals and organisations to share and produce information to support the planting of trees in urban areas. So we have workshops and webinars online, we respond to policy consultations, and we produce best practice guides. We have a whole range of guides. If you're working with any urban trees and you haven't checked out your guides, I strongly recommend our website. We have lots of different stuff on there, from really detailed guides of like 150 pages on how to plant a tree in an urban landscape, through to 4-sided guides, of which the front page cover is always an image, and they're the guides that I produce. So we've done 5 over the last few years, affiliated with BIFoR, and you can access all of these from the TDAG website. We've also got with the Times in the last year or so, and now we have a YouTube channel where we record and share all of our webinars that take place online. We run webinars every 2 months, and those have a series of presenters. We run it on Zoom, and we encourage anybody to put any kind of information into the chat that they can do. And we get 100 to 200 people coming along. So there's really an awful lot of information and best practice shared on those, and you can catch up with those online. But what I really wanted to talk to you about today was Biophilic Birmingham, Tree City of the World, where, okay. Thanks, Rob. Okay, how's that? People at the very back. Oh, people online, I'm sorry. I'm also really full of a cold, so I'm quite self-conscious about how I sound today, that and the northern vowels. Okay, right, I'm now going to be massively over time. Sorry, Rob. Let me take you to Birmingham. Most of us are really familiar with Birmingham. It's where we live and work. It's the UK's second biggest city. We have a population of 1.1 million. There's a real demand for housing. Something like 40 or 50,000 houses need to be built in the next few years. The population is young. I think we have the youngest population of a city in Europe, something like that. And in terms of our population, there's also a big difference in people who have and people who have not. And 10%, many of our wards are in the top 10% of the most deprived wards within England. We also have our environmental challenges of poor air quality and urban heat island effects and pluvial and fluvial flooding. But somebody described Birmingham to me as countryside trapped in a city, and Birmingham is beautiful. There are parts of Birmingham that when you walk into them, they take your breath away. And here is, these are a few pictures from lockdown of my kids in an urban park that's bounded on 2 sides by dual carriageway and on 2 sides by a housing estate. It's absolutely beautiful. And here's another couple of pictures that I like to show, because this is the park giving us ecosystem services. And that puddle is deceptively deep. We went home with wet feet that day. But what happens when it rains heavily in Birmingham is the river, the Bourne Brook, it floods into the park holds that moisture, it gradually dries out. And we talk about natural flood management and slowing the flow in our upland areas, but parks and cities can do this for us too. The second picture on the side is when it's really hot. When it's hot, I take my kids to play under trees because then I don't need to use sun cream. And you can also play under trees in summer when it's raining and you stay dry. It's less effective in winter when there's no leaves, but the countryside trapped in the city of Birmingham provides us with so much for us as people and so much for nature. But not all of Birmingham is equally green, and my experience of Birmingham is not the same, is not the experience that everybody has of Birmingham. And the pandemic really highlighted the inequality in access to green space that we have across the city. I chose this particular image of part of Birmingham because when you look down on a satellite image from Sky, it looks green because you have these housing blocks that are surrounded by green space. But when you stand in that green space, you're next to a dual carriageway. There is no urban forest or brook to kind of buffer you from the road noise or from the pollution. And when everybody comes out of those buildings, there isn't space for everybody to be utilising that green space. And it isn't somewhere where you'd want to spend time either. And so it's not just about the quantity of green space, it's also about the quality. And the city recognised this, Birmingham City Council, and the natural environment is becoming increasingly important in addressing environmental injustice in the city and part of the levelling up. So in the past, as the, find the link, in the past, as the previous presentations showed, Birmingham used to be known as the city of 1,000 trades, but it has this vision of the future of being known as the city of 1,000 green spaces. And they have really strong aspirations to deliver change within the city through nature and green infrastructure. And so a lot of this work has been delivered in a lot of this work has been led by Nick Grayson, who retired this year. But in 2014, Nick led the way for Birmingham to be declared a biophilic city. So biophilia means a love of nature, and being a biophilic city is about putting nature at the heart of your planning system. It's been a tree city of the world since 2019. We are the first city in Europe to have an urban forest master plan, and it might be because we call it a master plan rather than a tree strategy, but that was led by Birmingham tree people, who are a group of volunteers who take care of the city trees, but also support the council in delivering our aspirations for the greenery in the city's future. And if you look at our city plan for 2040, every page you turn is green. And it really is amazing the journey that we've been on in the last few years to incorporate nature within the city. So today I wanted to talk about a few projects that we have done as part of the collaboration that we've had with the local authority over the last 15 years. It's not just been me, but the people before me, like Rob and Chris Rogers in engineering, and a whole load of other people. And a lot of this collaboration and sharing of agendas has been possible because we have had people who have been based both in the city and also within the university. So one of the things we worked on a couple of years ago was with Birmingham City Council and other stakeholders in the West Midlands region to try and understand how air quality is incorporated within the planning process. So we did a lot of stakeholder engagement. We understood where it was working, where it wasn't working, and then we produced a 2-page guide about how you can use urban design to have better air qualities in cities. I don't really want to talk about that today. What I really want to talk to you about is the work that I've been doing on my fellowship over the past few years. And in 2018, I received funding to have a fellowship called Bringing the Mediterranean to Birmingham. And the idea was that we'd think about this far future where we'd have Mediterranean temperatures within the city and how the city could adapt and be resilient to future climate change. As it happens, the Mediterranean came to Birmingham last year, and we've had, since I started my fellowship, we've had 4 of the hottest summers on record within the city. And of all the graphs and infographics that the Met Office produced, this is the one that alarms me the most, because you can really see how the heat of the hot days and the frequency of the hot days are really ramping up. And despite all of this, there's no means to consider future heat within the planning system. We're going to build those 40 or 50,000 houses in Birmingham and houses across the rest of the UK without thinking that the future will be hotter. And so part of my fellowship was understanding how we could bring the science into the planning process to understand how to be resilient for the future. So in terms of thinking about how we can map and consider heat vulnerability, the first thing that was really important to me was that if we were going to create a decision-making tool, that decision-making tool should influence decisions. And so I know, you'd be surprised how many don't. So we did a lot, and I'm not being judgmental. So where was I? Decision-making tools should influence decisions. Knowledge exchange. I do a lot of this. I was seconded to the council. I spoke to people. People are really patient with me explaining the planning system, helping me understand how it works. And the other thing that was important was that we just need to understand heat vulnerability enough. We don't need a perfect model. We don't need to keep working and doing more research, because by the time we're finished, more houses are built. And so we came up with this idea of like a minimum viable product approach. If you think of the first iPhone that came out however many years ago and the iPhone we have now, the iPhone got better with time and with feedback and with use, and that's the idea. We need to start incorporating heat vulnerability now, and the means by which we do it can improve with time. It's also really important that this isn't a research product, that it sits with the local authorities, so that when I work on different projects, or when anyone works on different projects, that the local authority can continue updating and utilising the data. And so it also has to be something that they can use within the city resources and capabilities. And also, because we're so fortunate to be able to do this in Birmingham, it's really important that what we do in Birmingham, we try and make useful for everywhere else. So the thing about heat is it's really complicated trying to think about how you can incorporate all these different factors in understanding what contributes to heat vulnerability. I had to create a legend for the front cover of this first step guide because there was just so many different interactions just to think about between the green infrastructure and the grey infrastructure and the land and the emissions. And how can you include all of this within a local authority to tell you where it's going to be vulnerable to heat when you're thinking about where to build houses in the future? And so I think you can probably do it by just combining 4 layers. And it's really important that these 4 layers are open access so that we can repeat this anywhere within the UK. So, and it'd be really great if somebody tells me that, happy to discuss this. So if you think I need another layer, let me know. But the 4 layers I think we can map heat vulnerability with are surface temperature. So that gives you a big idea of how surface temperature is changing across Birmingham, because it's a big area. The second thing that I think we can use to try and understand the urban heat island effect are something called local climate zones. That's an academic product, but you can download it freely online. And what local climate zones do is they tell you whether your particular location is, whether it's green or whether it's urban. And if it's urban, whether it's kind of low, medium or high rise, and whether it's open or compact. So if it's low rise and open, then it will lose heat a lot more quickly at night as compared to high rise compact form. So it's a proxy for the urban heat island. The other thing that's really important is green space, because green space is somewhere for us to go when we are hot. It's somewhere that provides a local cooling effect, whether it's by kind of venting to the atmosphere at night or providing localized cooling through evapotranspiration and trees. And so green space deficit is another layer. Last not least, because we're thinking about vulnerability, we have to be thinking about the people who live in these places. And for that, we use indices of multiple deprivation. So add them all together, and this is the heat vulnerability map for Birmingham. And where it's yellow, it's where it's lowest vulnerability. Where it's purple, it's where it's highest vulnerability to future heat. And this map is like any map of Birmingham. Whatever you're mapping, there are places that always come out good, and there are places that always come out less good. And that gives me, it makes me feel intuitively that what we're doing is correct. The other thing that's interesting about this is here, this is the urban heat island of Birmingham. And so if you were just thinking about surface temperature, this is probably where you would get the highest temperatures, but it's not just where Birmingham is vulnerable to future heat, because all of the kind of northeastern part of Birmingham, where we have wards within the top 10 percentile of the indices of multiple deprivation, less green space and lots of kind of compact housing, these areas are also vulnerable too. So I'm only at 2 minutes. So that's mapping heat vulnerability. You give this to the local authority, and that's a map. We need to work with them to understand how we can kind of weave it into the planning process. And there's a flow chart here that kind of works through, and it links to things that the council are doing in terms of introducing the urban greening factor to help support biodiversity net gain, and making sure that nature is being used as a nature-based solution to make us resilient for future climate. That was what I would have spent a while doing with my fellowship. What we're now doing is we're taking it on to not just map heat, but map all of climate vulnerability for Birmingham. And a lot of this work has been led by Sarah Greenham, who's on the slide there. And what we did was we didn't just think about heat vulnerability, we also brought in flood risk. And we developed a map with the city GIS team that's being trialled with the city planning and design team. The map's available on the city website now, and it's also being used for the carbon disclosure project reporting by the city. And all of the methodology and data is open access, and I think that QR code that Sarah's put on should be able to take you through to the methodological instructions. So climate risk and vulnerability, because it's GIS, we can have it in all sorts of different formats. You can have it very high resolution like this. We can map it to lower super output area, or we can map it to ward boundaries. However the city wants to make decisions, they can reproduce this map because it sits within their GIS team. So I've reached my last slide, Rob. So I wanted to think of everything that I've kind of been through, everything that I've been through in my presentation, and how that kind of reflects to this, and reflects on this particular session, which is about a mutually assured future for people and forests. And I think two things stood out for me. When we're thinking about the future and people in our cities, when I run the TDAG events online, there are so many determined people working for trees in our urban areas, and I have so much hope because of all the great things that people are doing, not just in Birmingham, but across the UK. Specifically in Birmingham, it's been amazing to see nature become more and more part of the planning process, and that people really see nature and the environment as a means to deliver change and enact environmental justice and enable levelling up. And I think through urban greening, we will make Birmingham resilient to future climate change. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much, Emma. And I'm really impressed at the connections you were able to make. We're going to finish the conference with a keynote, an end keynote lecture from one of the country's most important climate scientists, Richard Betts. He holds senior positions at the University of Exeter and in the Met Office. I'm not going to give him too big of a blurb because I want him to speak. So without further ado, Rich, over to you.
Thanks, Robert. Okay, thanks, Rob. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I'm excited for two reasons, actually. First of all, I'm a huge fan of BIFoR. You do amazing work here. It's just brilliant. Secondly, it's nice to come back to Birmingham. I did my master's course here in meteorology and climatology in the Muirhead Tower 30 years ago in the geography department. So thank you for the invitation to speak. So Rob gave me a very interesting piece of homework for this. He said, can you do a talk on the world's forests in 2100? Of course, we can't really predict what the world's forests will look like at the end of the century,